There is a silence in our town, a hollow space that hangs in the air between the words of our elders. We all feel it, this seventh silence, this ghost in our family trees. We are taught from infancy not to question the empty chair, the portrait that ceases, the name that is whispered only in dreams. The seventh child vanishes on the dawn of their 18th year, and we are commanded to look away, to speak of the weather, of the harvest, of anything but the terrible, gnawing absence. But I will not look away. For I am the seventh. And as I stand before this precipice, I have not sought weapons of steel, but armor for the soul. Ye have peered into the dark glass of human nature, and I have gleaned secrets, not of magic, but of a psychology that forges respect, a respect that may be my only lantern in the coming dark. The first secret is this: embrace a composed silence. In the face of the dreadful, the mind screams for distraction, for chatter, for any noise to fill the void. But I have learned that respect is not won in the clamor, it is forged in the quiet. When others fidget and fret, let your stillness be a testament to an unspoken strength. Let them wonder what fortitude lies beneath such calm. It is in the silent spaces that you truly listen, and in listening, you learn the secrets that others carelessly give away. The second, anchor yourself to principle, not opinion. The world will tell you what to fear, what to desire, how to behave to avoid the fate that stalks you. But to bend with every wind of gossip or decree is to be a sapling in a storm. You must find a creed within your own breast, a code that is yours alone. Let your actions spring from this deep, personal well of conviction. When you act not for approval, but from principle, your every step carries an undeniable gravity. People may not understand your path, but they will respect its certainty. The third secret is the art of observing the unspoken. We are taught to ignore the disappearance, to blind ourselves to the truth. But I have trained my eyes to see what is not shown, and my ears to hear what is not said. I watch the tremor in a hand, the dull quick smile, the way a gaze darts toward the old woods. The true map of our predicament is not drawn on paper, but etched in the fearful glances and guarded phrases of those around me. To see this is to possess a knowledge more powerful than any blunt accusation. The fourth, let your word be a forged promise. In a world built upon a lie, language has become cheap currency. Do not contribute to its devaluation. Be miserly with your assurances, but when you give them, let them be as binding as fate itself. Do not promise lightly, do not swear an oath you cannot keep. Let every yes, and every no, be a stone laid upon the foundation of your character. In time, people will know that your word is your bond, and in that knowledge, they will grant you a profound and unshakable trust. And the final, most vital secret, cultivate an inner sovereignty. You are the master of your own spirit, the ruler of the vast landscape within. Do not outsource your composure to the mob, or your courage to the comfort of the crowd. I have spent my days fortifying my mind, filling its libraries with thought, its halls with resolve. The judgments of others, their pity or their fear, are like rain against a window, they may be seen and heard, but they must not be allowed to dampen the fire within. This self-possession is the ultimate source of respect, for it declares that you belong to yourself, and no other. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on my 18th year. I do not know what shadow will fall upon me. But I will not meet it with a frantic heart. I will meet it with a respectful silence, with principled action, with observant eyes, with a word that is my bond, and with a soul that is my own sovereign kingdom. And if I am to be the next silence in our history, I will ensure it is a silence that thunders with respect, a mystery that future seventh children will feel not as a dread, but as a challenge to become unbreakable. The first secret, the power of composed silence, is not merely the act of being quiet, it is a deliberate and strategic practice of harnessing the space between words to project authority, cultivate perception, and command respect. In the context of the speech's central horror, the unspoken terror of the disappearing seventh children, silence is the town's currency of complicity. But for the protagonist, it is reclaimed as a weapon of psychological fortitude. This principle argues that in a world saturated with noise, anxiety, and frantic explanation, the ability to remain composed and silent is a superpower that separates the leader from the follower, the respected from the overlooked. At its core, composed silence is an act of emotional regulation. When faced with a threat, a difficult question, or social pressure, the primal, limbic system of the brain screams for a reaction, to fight, flee, or nervously fill the void with sound. These manifests as rushed speech, unnecessary justification, or agreeing with others simply to end the tension. By choosing silence instead, you perform a profound act of self-mastery. You signal to your own psyche, and to everyone watching, that you are not governed by base impulses. This self-containment creates an aura of unflappability. People instinctively assign greater intelligence and capability to those who do not feel the need to explain themselves immediately. Your calm becomes a mirror in which others see their own agitation, and in that comparison, your stature grows. Furthermore, this practice transforms you from a mere speaker into a powerful listener and observer. When you are not preoccupied with formulating your next sentence, you are free to absorb the entire landscape of the interaction. You notice the micro-expressions that flit across a face, a flicker of doubt, a flash of insecurity, a glint of deception. You hear the slight tremor in a voice that contradicts confident words. You become aware of the room's atmosphere, the unspoken alliances, and the hidden anxieties. In the story's world, this means learning to see the fear behind the elders, enforced normalcy. In our world, it means understanding the true dynamics of a business meeting or a personal conflict. This gathered intelligence is a form of power, allowing you to respond not to what is being said, but to what is meant. Finally, composed silence manufactures weight and anticipation. When you finally do choose to speak, your words are no longer just sounds, they are events. Because you have been measured and quiet, your audience is conditioned to believe that what you are about to say has been carefully considered and is therefore valuable. A request made after a pause feels more like a command. An opinion offered sparingly carries the weight of conviction. This stands in stark opposition to the individual who chatters constantly, whose words become a form of background noise that others learn to tune out. Their frequent speech devalues their own currency. In essence, the power of composed silence is the power of reclamation. It takes the very tool of oppression in the narrative, the town's enforced quiet about the disappearances, and turns it into a shield and a lens. It is a deliberate withdrawal from the frantic economy of reactive communication. By mastering your own need to fill the void, you project an inner strength that chaos cannot penetrate, you acquire invaluable knowledge through observation, and you ensure that when your voice is heard, it is not just listened to, but heeded. It is the foundation upon which all other forms of respect are built. The second secret, the unshakable foundation of principle, addresses the profound human need for an internal compass in a world that exerts constant, and often coercive, external pressure. In the narrative of the seventh child, the entire community has surrendered its moral and intellectual autonomy to a single, horrific principle, collective denial. The townspeople's values are not their own, they are a dictated set of behaviors designed to avoid confronting a terrifying truth. To be respected in such an environment, or to even respect oneself, requires a fundamental rebellion against this external locus of control. It demands the construction of a personal creed so robust that it can withstand the gales of fear, tradition, and social ostracization. This principle is rooted in the psychological distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. An extrinsically motivated person acts for external rewards or to avoid external punishments. Their behavior is a weather vane, spinning with every shift in public opinion or authoritarian decree. The elders in the town are extrinsically motivated by their fear of the phenomenon itself and the social collapse that might follow its acknowledgement. Their principles are therefore fragile, maintained only by the conspiracy of silence. In contrast, an intrinsically motivated person acts from a core set of values that they have consciously examined and embraced. Their actions are generated from within, making them consistent, predictable, and therefore, trustworthy. When the seventh child decides to act based on their own inquiry and courage, they are operating from an intrinsic, principled stance. The power of this internal foundation manifests as unwavering consistency. People are naturally drawn to, and respect, those whose actions they can predict. When an individual's behavior is a direct reflection of their stated beliefs, when their walk matches their talk, they project integrity. This integrity becomes a rock in a swirling river. Others may not agree with the rock's position, but they cannot deny its solidity. They know where it stands. In a situation of universal fear, a person who consistently demonstrates courage, or in a culture of lies, a person who consistently speaks their truth, becomes a focal point. They become a reference for reality itself, a touchstone for others who feel adrift. Furthermore, this adherence to principle is what grants an individual their essential agency. To have one's values dictated by the crowd is to be a puppet. The choice to define one's own code, be it based on truth, courage, compassion, or justice, is the ultimate act of self-ownership. This does not mean the individual is inflexible or dogmatic. A truly principled person can adapt their methods, but their core values remain constant. This self-possession is magnetically respectable. It communicates that the individual cannot be easily bought, coerced, or manipulated, because their sense of reward and punishment comes from within, from their own assessment of whether they have lived up to their ideals. Ultimately, anchoring oneself to principle is about building a soul that is self-funded. It is the psychological equivalent of growing one's own food instead of relying on capricious masters for scraps. In the face of the unknown fate that awaits, the seventh child understands that to go as a supplicant, defined by the Totem sphere, is a form of spiritual death preceding the physical one. But to go as a self-defined individual, guided by an inner light of their own making, is to claim sovereignty over their own narrative. Respect is the natural consequence of this self-mastery. Others may fear the storm, but they cannot help but respect the lighthouse that stands unwavering against it. The third secret, the art of the unspoken observation, elevates perception from a passive sense to an active, strategic tool. It is the deliberate practice of reading the world not for its text, but for its subtext, not for its overt declarations, but for its involuntary confessions. In a community like the one in the speech, where the central, horrifying truth is foreboding, the entire reality of the situation has been forced underground. It has seeped into the subtle, nonverbal language of the populace, the averted gaze, the nervous tremor, the hastily changed subject. To understand the true nature of their predicament, the seventh child must become an archaeologist of these fleeting moments, excavating meaning from the fragments of behavior everyone else has been conditioned to ignore. This art is grounded in the psychological understanding that human beings are incapable of perfect concealment. Conscious thought, especially when laden with powerful emotion like fear, guilt, or anxiety, leaks through the body. This is known as nonverbal leakage. It manifests in micro-expressions that flash across the face for a fraction of a second, in the crossing and uncrossing of arms, in a change in the pitch of a voice, or in the way a person holds their body, postures that betray defensiveness, openness, or deceit. While the townspeople's mouths speak of mundane things, their bodies are screaming the truth. The individual who trains themselves to notice these cues gains access to a parallel conversation happening just beneath the surface of words, a conversation that is often far more honest and revealing. Mastering this art requires a fundamental shift from being a participant in dialogue to being, at times, a temporary witness. It involves the disciplined silencing of one's own internal monologue, the planning of a response, the forming of a judgment, to create a vacant space for pure reception. One learns to listen with their eyes, to feel the tension in a room, to notice who is not being looked at, and what topics cause a collective, almost imperceptible, stiffening in a group. For the seventh child, this might mean noticing that a particular elder always touches a locket when the disappearances are vaguely alluded to, or that the path to a certain part of the woods is kept conspicuously clear, yet never walked. These are the uncurated data points that form the true map of the mystery. The power derived from this practice is twofold. Firstly, it provides intelligence. In any situation, whether a corporate negotiation or a family dispute, the person who understands the hidden fears, desires, and alliances holds a significant advantage. They can anticipate moves, understand true objections, and address the real issues, not the stated ones. Secondly, and perhaps more profoundly for commanding respect, it creates an aura of perceptiveness that can be deeply intimidating and compelling. When you demonstrate, through a carefully chosen comment or question, that you see what others thought was hidden, you establish a formidable presence. People feel understood, and sometimes exposed, by you. This is not about wielding this knowledge cruelly, but about demonstrating a depth of understanding that transcends ordinary interaction. In a world of lies, the one who can consistently discern the truth, even the unspoken, uncomfortable truth, becomes an unignorable figure of authority. They are the one who reads the secret language of the world, and in doing so, commands a respect born of silent, undeniable insight. The fourth secret, the currency of measured words, confronts the profound devaluation of language that occurs in a society built upon a foundational lie. When a community collectively agrees to call a monstrous reality a mere absence, and to label deliberate ignorance as wisdom, words themselves are hollowed out. They lose their connection to truth and become mere sounds, social lubricants to avoid friction. In such an environment, to speak carelessly is to participate in the collective decay. Therefore, the act of reclaiming respect is intrinsically tied to the act of reclaiming language, treating each word not as disposable chatter, but as a rare and powerful currency to be spent with deliberate intent. This principle is rooted in the psychological concept of cognitive dissonance and the behavioral conditioning that follows. The townspeople experience a constant, low-grade dissonance. They know children vanish, yet they are forced to act as if the world is normal. To resolve this mental discomfort, they engage in rampant verbal conformity, using language not to express truth, but to reinforce the agreed-upon fiction. Their promises, their assurances, and their daily conversations become part of this performative facade, rendering their speech inherently untrustworthy. In this landscape of linguistic bankruptcy, the individual who chooses to be a miser with their words, and a tycoon with their follow-through, stands in stark, respectable contrast. The practice begins with scarcity. By speaking less, you automatically increase the perceived value of your speech. When you are not constantly contributing to the noise, people are conditioned to pause and listen when you finally do. Your silence creates a vacuum of anticipation that your words then fill with greater force. This is the opposite of the boy who cried wolf. By rarely raising an alarm, your warnings are heeded. By rarely giving compliments, your praise is cherished. This scarcity forces you, in turn, to be more precise and thoughtful. You learn to distill complex thoughts into their most potent essence, ensuring that when you speak, your meaning is clear, unambiguous, and carries weight. The ultimate application of this principle, however, lies in the unbreakable bond between word and deed. In a world where promises are easily broken because the social contract is already shattered, your personal integrity must be rebuilt through flawless reliability. A promise you make must be a promise that shapes your future actions, no matter the cost. When you say I will be there, you are there. When you say I will do this, it is as good as done. This consistency forges your spoken word into a bond of iron. People learn that your declarations are not merely sounds, but direct predictors of future reality. In a society adrift in uncertainty, this reliability becomes a fixed point, a lighthouse of trustworthiness. Ultimately, this transforms your language from a tool of description into an instrument of creation. Your words begin to shape the world around you because others believe in their substance. A commitment you verbalize is understood to be already in motion. This command over reality, mediated through the trusted vehicle of your speech, generates a deep and pragmatic respect. It is a respect earned not through eloquence or volume, but through the formidable, almost alchemical, power of turning your word into irrevocable action. In a den of liars, the one who never breaks their word becomes the undisputed authority. The fifth and culminating secret, the sovereignty of self-possession, is the capstone of psychological resilience and the ultimate wellspring of respect. It represents the deliberate and active construction of an inner world so rich, fortified, and self-sufficient that the judgments, fears, and opinions of the external world lose their power to dictate on its emotional state or self-worth. In the context of the narrative, the entire town has surrendered its collective psyche to the terror of the disappearances. Their identities are defined by this shared, unspoken trauma, their actions are dictated by it, their social bonds are warped by it. To be self-possessed, therefore, is to stage the most profound rebellion possible, the reclaiming of one's own inner territory from a culture of fear. This concept moves beyond mere confidence or self-esteem, which can be fragile and dependent on external validation. Self-possession is akin to sovereignty. It is the recognition that you are the sole ruler of the vast, internal landscape of your own mind. You establish its laws, you cultivate its gardens, and you man its borders. This involves a conscious process of introspection and fortification. You must become the architect of your own value system, the curator of the thoughts you entertain, and the guardian of your own peace. For the seventh child, this means building a personal identity that is not solely defined by their cursed status. It means finding value in their own courage, curiosity, and resolve, independent of the pity or fear they see in the eyes of others. The primary adversary of self-possession is the human tendency for external validation, the deep-seated need to be liked, approved of, and understood. In a hostile or manipulative environment, this need becomes a lever that others can pull to control you. The town's strategy relies on this. The fear of ostracization, the desire to be a good member of the community, keeps everyone compliant. By severing this dependency, by making your sense of self-worth internally generated and self-renewing, you render yourself immune to these social pressures. When you no longer need others' approval, their disapproval becomes a mere data point, not a command. This emotional and psychological independence is perceived by others as immense strength, even if it unnerves them. The outward manifestation of this inner sovereignty is an unshakable composure. Because your emotional state is not tied to the fluctuating moods and opinions of the crowd, you remain steady in a crisis, calm in the face of provocation, and resolute when others are wavering. This composure is not a lack of feeling, but a masterful management of it. It is the difference between a pond, ruffled by every passing breeze, and the deep ocean, which remains unmoved by the storms on its surface. This calm authority is magnetically respectable. It signals to others that you possess resources they do not, a deep, internal well from which you can draw strength when all external sources have run dry. In the end, the highest form of respect is commanded by those who demonstrate, through their every action, that they are the absolute masters of their own soul, and that no external force can ever claim tenancy within them.